Hello, welcome to Alive Abundant Living Session 3A, Nutrient Density. In the past couple sessions, we introduced you to the plate of life and talked about how to use the plate of life, you have to categorize foods into three groups: carbs, proteins, and vegetables. Hopefully you've practiced with that and have gotten some experience with trying to create meals according to the plate. There are other characteristics of food that are really important to understand. Our goal in Alive is to provide you with the information you need in order to best understand the food choices that you're making. Knowledge is power. We want you to make informed decisions. Today we're going to talk about nutrient density and caloric density. These concepts are very helpful for understanding nutrition. We'll start with a quick reminder of what density is. We'll take a brief trip back to middle school science class. For you scientists out there, this will be a bit oversimplified, but sufficient for our purposes. First, remember that all objects are made up of tiny particles that can only be seen in a microscope. So let's say you have two different objects and you look into a microscope and you look at the particles inside each of the objects. You see that one of the cubes has lots of particles and one has fewer particles. The one that has more particles is more dense than the other one. It's higher density material than the other object. Okay, so let's move on to food. Foods differ in terms of their nutrient density and their caloric density. What does that mean? Let's start with nutrient density. Let's say that these portions of objects we just saw are actually portions of food. So let's say we have 1 teaspoon of two different kinds of food. Say we have macaroni and cheese and collard greens. Now we're going to take our nutrient microscope to look at just the nutrients in the food. Using this microscope, we can count the nutritious particles in each teaspoon of food. The food that has more nutrients per teaspoon of food is more nutrient dense. So we took the exact same amount of each food, and we see that one food, the collard greens, has a lot more nutrients than the other food, the mac and cheese. So the collard greens are more nutrient dense than the mac and cheese. So now let's talk about calorie density. You can probably imagine what calorie density means already. It's the same thing as nutrient density, but instead of looking at nutrients, we're looking at calories. So now we're going to take our calorie microscope and look at the same foods, but look at calories. We're going to compare the amount of calories in the same amount of mac and cheese and collard greens. And what do we see? We see that the same amount of mac and cheese has many, many more calories than the same amount of collard greens. And so we call mac and cheese more calorie dense than collard greens. Collard greens is less calorie dense than mac and cheese. Let's look at this a different way. 1 cup of mac and cheese is 400 calories. If we have the same amount of collard greens, that is 1 cup, that's only 49 calories. If we have raw collards, that's only 11 calories. So some foods have lots more calories for the same amount of food as others. 1 cup of mac and cheese is a big portion of your total daily caloric intake, whereas 1 cup of collards hardly makes a dent in your daily caloric intake. How many cups of collard greens could you eat for 400 calories? You could eat 6 cups of cooked collards for 400 calories and 18 cups of raw collards to get 400 calories. This is because, again, mac and cheese is very calorie dense. There are a lot of calories in a small portion of food. In contrast, collards and other vegetables are not calorie dense. This is a great example because, well, it would be really easy to eat 1 cup of mac and cheese, and frankly, you probably wouldn't even be satisfied with 1 cup. Alternatively, it would be hard to eat 400 calories of collard greens. Think of how full you'd be if you ate 6 cups of collards or 18 cups of raw collards. That's one reason veggies are so great and should make up half your plate, because you can fill up on them and you won't gain weight. You literally cannot get fat eating vegetables, unless, of course, you add lots of high-calorie sauces. Now let's continue looking at mac and cheese and collard greens, but let's look at nutrient density instead of caloric density. Here we have 1 teaspoon of mac and cheese and 1 teaspoon of cooked collard greens. And we're looking through our microscope at the nutrients. This time we're looking at just one nutrient. In this case, we're looking at the amount of magnesium in 1 teaspoon of mac and cheese and 1 teaspoon of collards. Magnesium is critical for at least 300 bodily functions, such as regulation of blood sugar, strengthening bones, preventing and managing blood pressure, and much more. Here you see that despite the fact that mac and cheese has literally 10 times the calories as collard greens, collards have much more of this critical nutrient than mac and cheese. This is true of many other nutrients as well. So now I'm going to illustrate this using graphs rather than illustrations. This first graph shows the difference in the amount of calories in 1 cup of collards and 1 cup of mac and cheese. As we already saw, collards have only 49 calories per cup, while mac and cheese has 400. Now let's look at the graph for the nutrient magnesium. This graph shows that collards have 40 milligrams of magnesium in 1 cup, whereas mac and cheese only has 34. Collards have 50% more magnesium than mac and cheese. Let's look at other nutrients. Vitamin K is important in helping blood clot. Collards have 773 micrograms of vitamin K, while mac and cheese only has 13 micrograms. Calcium. We know calcium is important for strong bones. Collards have over twice the calcium as mac and cheese. Collards have 35 milligrams of vitamin C, while mac and cheese has none. Collards have 722 micrograms of vitamin A, and mac and cheese has none. Finally, we learned how important fiber is in the Rainbow Veggies video. Collards have 8 grams of fiber, and mac and cheese has only 2.5 grams. Collards and other vegetables are nutrition powerhouses. As we talked about before, vegetables are the food that God made us. If we eat vegetables, we feel better and our bodies function better because we are getting an abundance of nutrients. This is what our bodies need to function well and feel good. A lot of the food we eat has lots of calories and very few nutrients. That's why we call it empty calories. Don't deprive your body of these nutrients. So what does mac and cheese have in it if it doesn't have nutrients? Mac and cheese has lots of fat, sugar, and sodium. So in sum, mac and cheese has lots of calories, fat, sugar, and salt, while collards have very few calories, very little fat, sugar, and salt, but lots of nutrients. Which one should you eat? So, to conclude, foods vary in their calorie density and their nutrient density. Vegetables are the most nutrient-dense foods and also have the fewest calories. What a bargain! Processed foods, in contrast, are very high in calories but have very few nutrients. If you think about it, Vegetables may cost a little more than a burger at McDonald's or a box of mac and cheese, but what are you paying for? Shouldn't you be paying for real food that will actually feed your body nutrients instead of calories that taste good but fill you up with bad fats, lots of sugar and salt, and end up making you sick and shortening your life? Keep striving for 3 cups of veggies per day. Replace some of that processed food with veggies, and your body will be so grateful to be getting the nutrients it needs to be alive.